Hi guys, and welcome back to the Dublin Academy of Education podcast with myself, David Lewis. Today's podcast is fully focusing and centering around orals in school, so specifically French and Spanish orals, and we've got our French and Spanish superstar teacher, Katie Lenihan, in to tell us everything about it, tell us the bits and bobs, the percentages, and any single hack that I can think of and she can give to us, distilled down to one specific podcast. So Katie, thanks for coming in.
No worries. Listen, I didn't know I was a superstar.
Yeah, listen. Yeah, you gotta. When I was looking up how to interview people, one of the things you're meant to do at the start is make them feel really good about themselves.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for
being very honest as well. You know.
No, they didn't say that. So thanks so much for coming in. First things first, just about with the orals coming up. I know a lot of people get nervous and anxious, and that's all I hear about the school. Obviously, I know nothing about it. So could you tell us just a little bit about the orals and what you're kind of seeing at the moment?
Okay, so like I was just saying to you before this podcast, that the biggest problem is that people overthink what the oral exam is. So everyone loves to catastrophize it, to make it this like monumental event in their Leaving Cert, and fair enough, it's important. But I would think the most important thing to do before you even think about preparing it is like bringing it down to its most basic level. And all it is a 12 to 15 minute chat with an examiner. You know what I mean? That like, initially that's all it has to be. That like if you're very worried about it, then you just have to look at it like, okay, well it's 12 minutes of my day. I've gotten through 12 minutes before of things that have been difficult. I'm going to be able to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's, I think, and as well, that's one of the biggest problems is that people think it's going to be like a recital, and it's not. It's general conversation for 12 or 15 minutes with the state examiner, and that's what the oral exam is, like at its basic level.
Perfect. No, yeah. So you go in and you see 12. So you only have to do one.
Yeah. And
you sit in for 12 or 15 minutes with just a person and speak about whatever they talk. What percentage is it worth, or is that? So
actually, and this, I'm really glad you asked me this, because I think a lot of people don't know this, is regardless of the level of the language that you're doing, so whether you're doing higher or ordinary level, the oral exam is common level. So the examiner has no idea what level you're doing when you go into the room. And obviously they're going to be able to gauge it in terms of how comfortable you are or your reaction to more difficult questions, and they'll taper it as the exam goes on. But it's a common level entry exam, and for higher level it's 25%. And for ordinary level, it's 20%, but that will only be judged by the final examiner, who gets, your written paper, your listening paper, and they'll then, tot up what actual marks you got in your oral exam, and then, taper it accordingly for that subject, for the level, sorry. So for ordinary level, 20%, and higher level, 25%.
So, that seems like an unbelievable opportunity. If I was a higher level Spanish speaker, an unbelievable opportunity before your Leaving Cert starts and there's pressure. So, a good few weeks out before the Leaving Cert, you can potentially go in and, get in the high 20s or 25% out of the way. Yeah. So, it literally is an opportunity to do well.
And, I think that's the thing that students need to remember, is that, I always remember one of my maths teacher from my junior cert saying to me in school, she was like, Katie, the examiner's there because their job is to give you marks. And I think a lot of students go in and they think oh my God, this is going to cost me so many marks in my Leaving Cert, I'm going to do so badly in this. But you're not. Look at it like an opportunity that before you go in to do your final exam, and even the students this year are luckier than normal because they have their oral exams before their Easter holidays. Yeah. So they then have 2 weeks of, they could take a full week off if they wanted to, depending on how prepared they are for their final exams, but they don't have these 2 weeks of worrying about the oral exam. They already have up to 25% in their back pocket.
Yeah, out of the way early when there's no other distractions.
Yeah.
Wow, unbelievable. And so getting this straight. So it's a conversation. Then 20 to 25%, which it shows after, because they see if you're higher ordinary, with the person who doesn't know anything about you but is there to accommodate and facilitate your standard of French or Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. But when I say general conversation, and this is something that I'm really trying to hone in on with my day school, on my garden students up here in the academy, is, and with all due respect, what a lot of teachers will do to prepare the students for the oral exam is nothing to do with the oral exam. It's, okay guys, you're going to need to have an A4 page on your family, you're going to have an A4 page on your best friend or something. And then a student is completely shocked when they come out of the oral exam that the examiner didn't say, tell me about your best friend, and then give them the chance to just recite this A4 page. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So what I would be doing with my students is, say for argument's sake, if they've come in sixth year and they already have an A4 page based on their family, I would say, okay, can you break that up into different questions? So maybe the first part of your answer is about I don't know, your parents, or the second part's about your siblings, and then you might have something about your cousins or your aunties or your uncle or whatever. And I'd say break it up into sections and then think of, if you were the examiner, what's the question that they would have asked for you to give them that answer. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So then at least then what you can do is, say if I said, okay, like tell me about your mum and dad, that you'd say, okay, grand, that's the first part of my answer in my family, and I know where to stop, and I know what the last word is in that answer, so I can kind of sometimes predict what the examiner is probably going to ask me after that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like if you have an answer on your parents, and let's say for argument's sake, the last thing you say is, oh, I don't know, like my mum's a secretary, okay? And you stop there and you kind of gauge, does the examiner want you to continue on? And a lot of them will just kind of go like that, like, you know, you're doing well and keep going, tell me about your brothers or sisters or something. But they could say, cool, and what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And that's the bit where people struggle, because they're like, oh my God, like I'm not finished my answer about my family.
Yes.
And I thought you were going to ask me about my house next, like, because they're so used to seeing their notes laid out a certain way. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? That like people forget that it's general conversation.
Yeah.
You know, so if you say, oh, my mum's a secretary, and that's where you stop, well, like, if I'm trying to think of things off the top of my head as well, like I don't have a list of questions to just work off. Mm-hmm. And like say, okay, Gran will have asked her this, this, this and this. My instinct is going to be like, oh, and like, where's her office? Or what, do you want to be a secretary? Or, you know, what does your dad do? Or what, you know, do you have a brother or sister? What do they work as? That it's kind of going to tie in that sense, that it's not just, you know, boom, 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 like all these topics ticked off, that it will flow.
Yeah.
Which is even better, you know, because you can sit there and say, right, well, if I stop my answer here, like the examiner's probably going to want to know this next.
Yeah. Or,
you know, I can kind of steer this conversation the way I want it to go and avoid, you know, bringing up trigger words for topics that I don't really like talking about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the way to think about it. And like what you're saying, this opportunity, as opposed to this 12 minutes of complete catastrophe.
Yeah.
Of like, oh my God, I'm going to do so badly in this. Like, I'm never going to be able to do well in my written exam. Like, that's a lie.
Yeah, so you're going in with a strategic plan, but then you're flexible, and that's such a clever way to think about it. Instead of, because I'm slightly remember actually having exactly what you said, a big thing about my family, and then the examiner kind of speaking over me, go, what the hell?
Yeah,
and it's so like
some
students obviously then are just going in, well, if I learn this off by heart, and they're almost going in blind into what the actual thing is. It's like,
and then they're terrified, like they get such a shock when the examiner kind of interrupts them.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is that the examiner's not trying to interrupt you, but there are marks going for your ability to converse. Mm-hmm. So they want because obviously your exam's going to be recorded, like on, you know, a CD or an MP3 file or whatever, and they want to, when the final examiner gets your written paper, to have evidence of the fact that, and the student was able to hold a conversation. It wasn't just them trying to speak over me the whole time because they wanted to get to the end of their answer that they know in their head is at the end of the A4 page.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That they respond well to, you know, like random questions being asked in the middle, even though they're not random, they're still on topic, but it's just the examiner trying to say, okay, like stop, like I want to give you marks for conversation.
I get you, yeah. What would you say, so having examined people before, what do you think is, as an examiner from your point of view, do you have a list of like, I need to make sure that, you know, because I'm not sure, does this count when you walk into the room and you say hello, or is that just kind of subconsciously changing their mind, like if you say...
Yeah, I get you. I think, especially because as far as I remember, because I did the same Irish oral exam that like 6 years would be doing now, like my year was the first year to have the 40% Irish oral.
Yeah.
And we all went in completely blind because our teachers obviously hadn't seen this new oral exam before or anything, and that's completely fair. But as far as I remember, there's like, I think it might be 5 marks or something in Irish going for, you know, like your greeting or your introduction or something. And it's not done like that in Spanish. Like you'll go in and most examiners will just like show you their chart with like your name and your exam number and just get you to sign. Mm-hmm. And then they might say at the tape, like, you know, this is Katie Lenihan, exam number, like, I don't know, whatever it is. And then just say, like, and the thing is, it's quite easy to predict that if it's a common level entry exam, you're not going to walk in and they're not going to say, like, okay, what's your opinion of Brexit?
Yeah.
They want to gauge where you're at. So a lot of them will say, okay, like, how are you today? Like, how are you getting on in 6th year? Tell me a bit about yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, like, it'll be something that kind of, you would use in a normal conversation, like, as an introduction.
Yeah.
You know, so like there'd be no marks. I suppose what you're asking me is like, it's not 5 marks for this, and
not
this.
the second your toe comes in the door. It's not.
Yeah.
That's a Spanish toe. That's
Perfect. Yeah, you're wearing a flamenco dress. There's
That's fantastic. So when you come in there, when you've examined people, or even as you're preparing people, what would you say is the biggest mistake in preparation? We've kind of looked at a mistake in preparation, whether it's from the teacher's point of view. What would be another maybe big mistake or a big no that you would be saying to your students at the moment?
Well, I would say regardless of your level of the language, okay, and obviously, let's be honest about it, if you are struggling with French or Spanish or German or whatever, because as far as I know, German is the same as this, that the whole idea of having to go in and speak to someone that you don't know and kind of tell them everything about yourself in another language is very daunting, and like we can't, deny that or say that like that's a stupid fear to have, because it's not. It is daunting. But I would think that regardless of your level of the language, what you can do is, for lack of a better word, like fake it till you make it. That go in with a smile on your face and look at the examiner and use your hands and gesture and, really try and engage with the examiner. Fair enough, you might be struggling in terms of, the depth of the questions or something, but there's such a huge difference in someone who's looking at you and like smiling at you and really trying to make an effort. It's like an interview versus like someone who comes in and just sits like this and like I
get you, yeah.
But I remember like even when I was doing the mock orals up here a couple of years ago, and like I would use this story as an example to my students as to the impact that like your fidgeting can have. Like I had a girl who came in and was so, without being mean, it was so obvious that she'd never done a practice oral before, so this was her first mock oral that she had done, and she was like fidgeting with her hands for so long, and then she started like doing this really weird thing where she was like scratching herself, but like, and she stopped blinking while she was doing it, so I started getting real like what's
nervous.
going on, I was like, okay, she's going to attack me or something, but she made herself bleed in the exam. But and like she was so like zoned in on trying to just get through this that she didn't even realise, and I actually had to stop and say, I paused the tape, I was like, are you okay? I was like, calm down, breathe, whatever. And obviously as an examiner that's so unnerving, and apart from anything else I also can't even concentrate on what she's saying because I want to make sure that the child is okay. So, and like if you think about it, fair enough, like that's a very rare circumstance, but like I've had students come in like crying in an exam. Students have come in that have just said, listen, like I may as well not be here, like I'm not going to be able to say anything. And I think the issue is, and maybe it's just a real Irish thing, is that we're all so self-depreciating that like we all just convince ourselves that we're going to do bad, or like it's kind of the trendy thing to say like, oh lads, like I'm not going to do well on this. And people then go in with this mentality that, well, I'm really bad at French, like I'm not going to do well, so they give up all hope of even getting the marks for trying to engage with the examiner and like come across as like, well listen, this is going to be difficult, but I'm going to try and make it as comfortable for myself as possible. And like there's 30 out of 100 marks going for communication.
So 30% of it for engaging.
Yeah, exactly.
So coming in and being nice and looking at people.
Yeah, and like and be willing to have a conversation and like engaging with what the examiner's saying, making eye contact, that even like the way you lift and drop your voice, so like your whole intonation, and like that's not including your accent, your pronunciation or anything, that's literally that you're not coming in and saying, hi, my name is Katie Lanahan, do you know what I mean? That like you're going in and be like, okay, well I know I'm going to be able to nail the 3 easiest sections, so that's where I'm really going to get my good communication marks. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So that's great, like that's 30 out of 100 marks for French going for that, but it would still be a huge factor of the Spanish one as well. It's just that with Spanish there's a couple of other things that are added in, but it's a huge factor of both languages for the oral exam.
With so you were saying that girl obviously hadn't potentially done one before, and like I just know from seeing students in the school and any of the schools I was in general that they get really, really nervous. Do most students do a mock oral beforehand? Do they do, like in most schools?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think so. I know, like in the schools that I've taught in, I've always seen the students do, and like when I say mock oral, I mean like that I've seen them all do an oral with their mock. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Whereas like up here, like we'd be lucky in that the students have already had the opportunity to do 2 or 3 mock orals, regardless of their actual mock exam. We say mock oral, but it's just like a practice, and whether that's 10 minutes or whether the student's in a rush and they only have 5 minutes, so they're all willing to go in and say, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity and
get in the arena,
Yeah,
get in the situation,
exactly,
feel those
because
feelings.
that's the worst bit, is just getting in the door, and because you sit outside the door in your Leaving Cert, freaking out and finding out what the person in front of you got asked, and you're there like, oh my god, this is going to be the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
But if you're used to being in that environment already, it's not as daunting.
Yeah.
So like I would even say to the students now that maybe if you're in a situation where you haven't done a mock oral yet, that, you know, organise one with your friends, or like even say to your friend, listen, could you choose 12 questions for me off the top of your head, write them down, and I'm going to see what I come up with on the spot.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That it's like, I think loads of people will just practice through writing, but you need to actually get used to, like, as weird as it sounds, like how your mouth has to move to say certain sentences, or like, do you actually know how to pronounce that word?
Yeah.
Like, what's your intonation? Like, is that a good sentence, like, to actually listen to, or does it sound a bit weird? That kind of things. But I would always be like on the ball trying to think of like, okay, give me 12 random questions.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That you're not just sitting there being like, okay, well, I have my A4 page about my family, I'm going to write that out 5 times and I'm going to learn it off, and like, the examiner better not interrupt me.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's again, that's another unbelievably clever way of building a base for you.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a few things about marks there, so maybe that might take that opportunity to go into the marks. It was 30. Are they different?
Okay, so easiest way for me to describe them is for French and Spanish, and for German as far as I know as well, that it's 100 marks on the table, right?
Yeah.
And for French, the way they're going to be divided up is 30 for communication. So like we were saying, your like willingness to converse, how engaged you are, you know, your eye contact, all that kind of stuff. So there's 30 out of 100 for that. Then there's another 30 going for grammar. So every student's worst nightmare. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's your verbs, that's your, you know, your adjectives, your pronouns, your articles. And for French, so if anyone here is watching this for French, all I'll say is your grammar and your pronunciation are so closely linked in French, because obviously French is such a tricky language in terms of you pronounce this letter and you don't pronounce this letter or whatever. But like, say for argument's sake, that the word for a in French is un and une, right? So for masculine and feminine, so un and une. So if you don't know how to pronounce two of those differently, that's going to get you in pronunciation marks. But also the examiner is going to think that your grammar's wrong because they can't decipher which one you're trying to use. Do you get me?
Yeah.
So 30 for communication, 30 for grammar, and then 20 for vocab. So what I mean by that is that you might make the effort to, and this is for a student of any level, you might make the effort to have a slightly different adjective than the 5 people that went in before you. Do you know what I mean? That if someone else is saying like, oh, this is a very difficult year, that when you go in, you're going to say this is a very demanding year.
Yeah.
Do you get me? So it's like you have something to help you kind of shine a little bit, and then pronunciation is 20 in French as well.
Okay, well.
So, and then for Spanish, those 4 things will still be taken into account. But the difference in Spanish is even better in terms of marks, because there's 30 marks out of 100 going for what's called your role play. So students will be given 5 role plays, and each of those role plays, they will have, it's like a conversation. So like, let's say you're the examiner and I'm the student, that the examiner will have a card and I'll have a card, and you'll read your sentence, and it'll be like a planned conversation, and I will have learned my 4 sentences in Spanish for that role play, and I'll just recite them.
So they're literally in front of you?
They're, like, as in the exam, you'll have them in English.
Okay, well,
but you have 2 years to learn 20 sentences for 30 marks.
Tough enough, that.
Do you know what I mean?
Bloody yeah, wow.
But,
yeah, no, that's
but
unreal.
also I think that's one thing that maybe some students don't know, is that when you go into your Spanish exam, you will have the English version of what you're going to say, and they're on examination study as well, if you know you're not familiar with what they look like, just to get used to them.
Well,
so you've 4 sentences, so each of those are 6 marks, so that's 24 marks.
Yeah.
And then at the end, the examiner will ask a question relevant to the situation. So say, I don't know, I like off the top of my head, I know the last role play is like the examiner is meant to be a captain, and you're a passenger getting on this boat, but you're waiting for your friends still haven't arrived, and you're trying to convince the captain to stay for 10 more minutes. So obviously a very accurate situation as to how you'd find yourself on holidays or something. But anyway, at the end of that role play, the examiner has to ask you a question that's relevant to the situation.
Okay.
So they might say something like, how long have you been here for? You know, do you sail at home? Like, do you own a boat? Like, you know, like random things, but like there's going to have some sort of relevance to the conversation.
Have you seen the Titanic?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, bottom of the sea. Okay.
Yeah. And then all that student has to do to get the 6 marks. So like I said, we've 24 marks going for the 4 things we've learned off, and we've another 6 then to get us to the 30. So all that student has to do for those 6 marks at the end is say a logical sentence with a verb.
Yeah.
So like all jokes aside, you could say, do you like sailing?
Yeah.
And I could say, yes, I like sailing. And I get 6 marks.
Okay, wow. So that's so.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's
when you break it down, it's so like, well, that sounds extremely manageable.
Yeah. So then you've got, and it's 70 marks then for general conversation. And again, then you've got communication, grammar, vocab, and pronunciation. That will come into higher marks then for general conversation.
Okay, yeah. So like, well, first of all, the way you seem to have broken it down and what we were talking about before, the mistake, and then the actual mark breakdown seems, you know, like, see, like to me, I wouldn't have liked doing it in school whatsoever. But like, you know, now with kind of new mindset of breaking up and that you can do stuff, it seems to be quite easy to do. Okay.
Yeah, and like to put it into perspective, and I say this to my students now, and I'm not trying to say this to be funny or like relative or whatever, but when I was in 6th year, I had like such severe anxiety about everything, and I was in a really kind of bad place mentally. And when I came up to my oral exams, I was actually accidentally scheduled to have French and Spanish on the same day. First of all, on my 18th birthday. Second of all,
wow, yeah.
But I was so nervous for my French one, which I had first, that my French teacher was chasing me around the school. I ended up calling her...
Inappropriate?
Yeah, I ended up calling her an inappropriate name and told her that I wasn't doing the exam, and she couldn't make me do it. My teacher had to stand outside the door to make sure that I wouldn't leave the exam room.
Yeah.
And I went in, and like, you don't even see the 12 minutes going, you know? So, but I was that student that went into my French oral exam with a bright red face, like having just bawled crying. I was so out of sorts, and like I still managed to get, well, what would be a H1 now, but an A1 overall. And I don't know what I got in my oral exam because I didn't look at the breakdown of my marks.
Yeah.
But I could have had a complete disaster and brained the whole thing and still kind of pulled it together.
Yeah.
And scraped the marks in the written exam and the listening as well. Do you know that it's not this like huge determining like lifelong factor that people make it out to be, like I made it out to be.
Yeah.
And I would say to my students now, like you're saying, that actually the marking scheme works quite well in your favour, and especially for Spanish, like you could be a disaster at the general conversation and still bag a quarter of the marks for saying 4 sentences.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's the reality of it. Like.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And now you do that for a living.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I do for. I just
hilarious.
tell all my cringy stories and get paid for it. So.
No, but I mean, like you speak in front of people and you ask the question in those different languages. That's unreal. So in terms of like we said before, to prep to actually do it, you know, if David Lewis is in your class, how many practice goes would you suggest that, obviously not including friends, but like within the exam, how many practice goes would a student that's in your class right now have before they go to do the oral?
So from September to...
Yeah. Or 5th year even, but from September, we'll go 6th year.
For 6th year, absolute minimum 3.
Yeah.
But more than likely 4, if not 5.
Yeah.
Depending on...
Well...
Yeah, but depending on like the student's timetable and the examiner's timetable, that sometimes they might be out, or sometimes, you know, they might not be able to go, but they would have the opportunity to do up to 5 practice orals. But they've done 2 already, and
it's almost like doing 4 or 5 mocks before doing Leaving Cert. Now, obviously we don't do that,
and
but
like that's what I say, like to the guys up here. I'm like, guys, even if it's a complete disaster, you still have a full page of feedback that you can take on to the next one.
To improve.
You know? I was like, no one's going to give out to you if you don't do well. Like that's, you know, that happens. Grant, like everyone brains an exam every now and then, but I'd so much rather you brain 3 or 4 of the mock orals rather than go in and brain the real one and then come out and say, oh my god, I'm raging, I didn't do the practice ones.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
That's the reality of it.
What we're getting close to the time now. David Lewis has not paid attention in your class for a long time. Katie, I've been thinking about other things, chin-ups obviously, and what do I do if I'm like, okay, well, geez, that's actually a way that I could actually get a lot of marks for my Leaving Cert with a little amount of effort if I go away and plan something. How would I go ahead and start to prepare material that I was going to say? Or like, I know you have this booklet here for your students, this workbook that helps them out. Could you talk us through this?
So this is part of it. So this is 3 chapters, right? But this is just because I didn't want to bring the whole thing with me, but to give you an idea. So like, I would be thinking of it like planning, practicing, perfecting.
Yeah.
That like, you're going to plan what you're going to say, you're going to practice how you're going to say it, or you know how you're going to structure it, whatever, and then you're going to perfect it, and then have your final answer written out, and just have it there for future reference for when you actually want to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to take the time now to actually fully learn this off. You know. So what I've done here is, so we've got like 4 little boxes, right? So I would say, like, say for the first section, right? So you're going to talk about yourself.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and actually that's one thing that I've noticed that in a few books or in with a few students and stuff, that's a section that people actually don't really prepare. And it's probably one of the easiest sections to prepare is about yourself. I think people don't really know that you can be asked to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not like, nothing's guaranteed, but like I'd rather have, 2 or 3 minutes prepped on it.
Then have to come up with it. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So like the 2 questions I've got here, like tell me a bit about yourself, or what are you like, in the sense of like what kind of person are you, whatever. So before I'd even go into just like being like grand, I'm just going to write this answer out and hope that it's good, you want to look at what are the key words you're going to use. Because if you draw a blank in the day of the exam, which can happen, like let's be real about it, you're not going to remember 3/4 of an A4 page like that. But you need to think about, okay, what are the words that I'm going to be most comfortable with, that I'm going to remember, that I'm going to make sure are in my answer, so that if I do draw a blank, they're the things that are going to come back to me.
Yeah.
So like you've got your keywords, then your important verbs that you're going to use. For H1 students, what I'd be doing with that is, like if you're trying to get into that, like, niche area of this bell curve, that you don't want to always have the same verbs as everyone else. So find a different way of saying it. Like I know even recently what came up with my 6th years was, instead of saying like, I want to be a doctor, say like, I aspire to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Little things like that, okay? So like, what are your important verbs going to be? Do you have anything that's going to help you stand out? So I don't know, like, are you, for argument's sake, talking about yourself, like, are you a twin? Like, do you do something in your spare time that's different? Like, are you an athlete? Like, so like yourself.
A standout point for me, I wear black t-shirts.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean.
Shirts.
Yeah, it's a big day today. Obviously, it's finally getting you in. I have to put the collar on.
You can do 500 chin-ups in 5 minutes. Like,
yeah.
That's exactly. That's the first thing you should say.
But it literally can be anything. So is anything that makes you different.
But like that's what I mean, because you need to think about, and I think this is what people forget, is that like the examiner is a human, and like you could be the last person in on the last day of the oral exams, and everyone's going to say like, oh, I don't know. And I love rugby or something. And you could go in then and be like, well, actually, I really like basketball.
Yeah.
And that's straight away going to get the examiner's attention.
Yeah.
And it's also, that's your standout point. That's how you're going to steer the conversation. The examiner's going to want to know more about that, out of the fact that it's not going to be the same answer as everyone else.
Yeah, if you bring up something different, that's something they're going to focus on.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
And like, but also then if you don't want to talk about it, I'm not going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Do you get me? And then like I was saying earlier, to think of, right, if I'm going to mention these things, what else is the examiner going to want to know? So like that, like you could say like, I really like basketball or something, and you could be the only person so far that said basketball. Well, that's straight away going to be your link question. Like that's what the examiner is going to ask. Yeah, so you could then brainstorm yourself, like, okay, what potentially would I ask in that situation? Yeah. Like, what team do you play for? How often do you play? Yeah, exactly. That sort of stuff. Yeah. So cool. That would be like my initial kind of brainstorm of it. And then I'd start having a think of, right, do I have everything that I want to have done for that section? Yeah. Checked. So like, that's like a small little chart that took me maybe 2 minutes to make on Google Docs. And like anyone can do that. That doesn't have to be that you're asking your teacher to make it for you. Like you could do that for yourself. Yeah. So like for yourself, we've got like name, surname, age, date of birth, like your star sign, which again is a bit weird, but you're trying to think of things that are a little bit different. Yeah. Your hair, your eyes, like what height you are. And then I would say to my 6th years here that if you get asked about yourself, that instead of always having everything like me, that maybe after a while you could say, well, my parents say this about me, and that's your variety of tenses for your grammar. You know what I mean? That's more pronunciation, it's different, it's a standout point, and my best friend says this. So like, let's say for argument's sake, you could say, well, I think I'm very hardworking, but my parents always say that I'm really lazy. And also, without, like, I know that's a really bad joke, but like, that's your attempt at humour, and that's your communication marks. Yeah, no, it was a good joke. Thank you, I really try my best. And then do something about what your friends say about you, and then like, what are your hobbies? But then again, you could say, right, well, if I stop talking here as to what my parents say about me, what's the examiner going to want to know? If the examiner lets me get up to here, then what are they going to want to know? Yeah, so like, stop your parents, like if they stop you speaking with your parents, they might ask what your parents do, or something like that. Yeah. Or what does this mean? So your friends. So like you could say. So they wouldn't ask me about that. Great. If you've got a hobbies, then they might like. So it would be saying a hobby. If they stop you there, they might ask you maybe like, say if I said I played rugby, they might ask you who I played for, or how long have I played. You'd say Ireland. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect, right? And then we'd work through a sample answer. And actually, like it's so funny because I have kept everything that I've had since 6th year for French and Spanish.
Okay.
Because I've always wanted to be a teacher, do you know what I mean? So I was like, I'm going to keep everything and it's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
So that's my actual answer from my 6th year French oral. But obviously, like I've looked back at it now and like added a few things in and stuff, but that's the bones of it. But that my students can see, this is what I did when I did my Leaving Cert.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is how and you can see there, like I've broken it up into points.
Mm-hmm.
So I know then, okay, well if I stop here, and then I would give them a page to just like, and this can be as messy as needs be, to just keep writing your answer down to try and get it into your head. And then they'd have a page where they can have their final answer, and this is exactly what they're going to learn. And again, that would be broken up into points or like mini sections or something.
Yeah, so like if they were doing an essay or if they're planning something, you know, they brainstorm, they have to try to get it in, and then you perfect it at the end. You can't just automatically, like I suppose in college, like when you're producing, there's a thesis, probably the last thing I produce, you can't just like, here's the first draft and it's also absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
So,
it's like driving a car, like you're not going to go in and do your driving test without having done all your lessons. You know, I mean, like you shouldn't.
okay.
You shouldn't. You're like,
I know, that's the way it is. Yeah, no, in fairness. So
but it's bit by bit that like you learn a little bit every time you do it.
Yeah.
So.
And you can build on that. Tell me this then, on the. So I think you kind of alluded to some of these before. Other ways that you could potentially study. So you have all like writing down and putting it there, asking your friend. What about, now this is just me saying because these are just ideas I had from when I was talking about a study optimization course that I did here. It was like speaking into your phone and then listening to yourself saying it again. Is that Yeah, and like I remember even I like, believe it or not, I really wasn't very cool in secondary school. I know it's hard to fathom, but I remember when I was in 6th year, I had this like... No comment, by the way. Oh, go on.
I had this like Sony Ericsson phone.
What's that?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it was pretty cool because it like it slid up, and it had an MP3 player on it, and I thought that I had like made it with this phone, and I hadn't. And I still haven't. But
no, you will one day.
One day I'll be like you.
Yeah.
But I used to record myself. So I'd literally have like on my phone like, okay, moi même or yo mismo, so myself, and then I'd have my answers about that, and I'd just be listening to them on the way to school.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like I know that's it's not the the most riveting thing to do, but the more you hear what you're trying to say, the more familiar you're going to be with it. Like, and it's not even like active studying. Like that's just passively trying to do something to get you that edge. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, the way I would see it, the reason I asked you to say about that was because, like, if I was singing a song, you can sing like any song that you know well, that you've heard a good few times. You can actually sing it without even thinking about what the next word is. It just comes out. So I suppose it would be quite similar with this. If you kept hearing yourself in your voice saying it, you would literally be able to say it without thinking. You would be able to say it while focusing on, what if I stop here, they might ask me this. Yeah. So you don't have to concentrate.
And also another huge thing is when you record yourself, you see how long it takes you to say the things.
Okay, yeah.
So like if it's a 12-minute exam, and like this is what I would say to the 6th years, and not that it's like a bad thing to say, but like let's say for argument's sake you have 12 minutes, right? And you're going to be nervous, okay? And you, within the first 2 minutes, have everything said about yourself and your family. And all of a sudden then, at the end of the exam, the examiner is trying to make up the last 2 minutes at the time and has nothing but harder questions to ask you. Whereas if you have a ton of material prepped on yourself, your family, or the things that like you're comfortable speaking about, that you have more material to spend time on in the exam. Now, fair enough, the examiner can steer you away from certain things, but you still have that material there to bring up later on during the exam. That, like, I would say to the 6th years, like, be savvy about what you're saying. Like, if you can spend 4 minutes of the 12 minutes talking about yourself and your family and be getting perfect marks in those, do that. Versus then at the end, the examiner being like, okay, well, like, what do you think about Trump? Legend. And you're sitting, and you're sitting there being like, listen, like I haven't got anything to say about that, and that's going to cost you marks then because you haven't provided anything that's kind of like quite engaging with good pronunciation or good grammar, for the last minute and a half. So like, be savvy about spending time on the easier topics
and stuff that you're comfortable with. I know, I get you. Would is it possible? Like, I know every examiner is different, and you told me that before. You said like every examiner could be focusing on different things and that. But is there certain, like every year, like those extra questions, certain topics that come up, or like is it like stuff to do with like the news, and is that up to you, like say yourself as a teacher or the student to kind of say, well, what's been going on the last 4 months is X, so maybe they'll ask me about X.
Yeah, well, I would say the other side of it is in the written paper for both languages, like you have to write an essay in French and Spanish, like an essay, like an opinion piece, like a small essay.
Is essay a Spanish word?
No.
No? Okay,
No,
sorry.
No.
But
Actually, essay is the Spanish word for the letter S.
Yeah, no, but essay. Because I was listening to a song by Bo Burnham and he uses the word essay. Does that? Anyway, sorry. Sorry. So I went a bit off track there. Cut it. No, we're so good here.
Yeah.
So what you mean is you have to write an essay anyway.
Yeah. So like, say the main things I would have looked at throughout the year with the 6 years would be things like the environment, health, mental health, technology, social media, politics, homelessness, this kind of stuff. So you should have the vocab anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it's just then again being savvy and saying, right, well, how am I going to use this in my oral exam? Like what words am I, you know, most comfortable with remembering? And trying not to freak yourself out. Like not every examiner is going to go in and be like, let's discuss the Trump presidency. You know, because you also have to think about it. Like they have to think of the questions off the top of their head as well.
Yeah.
Like, and I remember.
Well, like in a maths exam, they don't put the very hardest thing on for every single topic because they want a pile of blanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, it's a conversation. So like the examiner doesn't want it to be awkward either. Like, they don't want to be sitting there with the students looking at them like, what?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like they want to have a chat as well.
Yeah,
like it's easier for them.
Don't one word answers.
Yeah. But in terms of having stuff prepped, again, it's being, you know, like using your cop on and saying, right, well, like, okay, let me give you an example. One of the mock orals towards the start of the year, a student got asked to talk about his house, right, which is a common question, like describe your house, and then he got asked, like, what's your favourite room in the house? And he said, oh, well, my bedroom, okay, which would be most teenagers' favourite room, whatever. So anyway, he described his bedroom and he said there was a TV. And the examiner said, okay, and do you watch TV a lot? And he came out and he's like, Katie, I don't know why I said this, but he said, I watch the news a lot. And then this...
Nerd.
Yeah. You know who you are. And then the examiner said, oh, and what's happening on the news? But that's what I mean. That's not a curveball. That's because the examiner thought that he said he was watching the news because he wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know, which obviously then he didn't. And he said the only word that fell out of my mouth was Brexit.
Yeah.
You know, and he was like, I didn't, yeah, exactly. It was like word vomit, he was like, Brexit.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure I couldn't tell you about that in English.
And listen, neither could I. I'm just pretending it's not happening.
Yeah.
But like that, he dealt with it. Like, and it wasn't all of a sudden that he was like, it wasn't like the examiner was like, haha, caught you, minus 20 marks. Like, that's not how it works. The examiner's still going to listen to what you say, and then based on your communication, your grammar, your vocab, and your pronunciation for that section, they will award marks accordingly. It's not like, oh, he didn't know the answer for that.
Yeah.
Like, you're not up against a set of, you know, particular questions.
Fantastic. And so as you said there, like, so the stuff you're learning for this actually not only do you get marks before, it doubles up for stuff you'll need in the exam.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable.
So, and that's what I mean about, like, when I was saying earlier on about people catastrophizing the situation, like, they're like, oh my God, like, imagine having to talk about this. You already have the information. And I don't know, maybe you're in a position where your teacher hasn't gone through some of those topics with you. That's fine. It should be in your book anyway. At least some of it, you know, and like, again, make it as easy as you like. Like, if you get asked, like, you know, about health or something and you're like, what? Just go back to things like sport or food or, you know, that you go for a walk with your dog every evening or something, that it's still relevant. You're still showing the examiner, listen, I know what you're asking me, but I'm just not 100%, you know, comfortable going into this much depth on it. But I'm still going to engage with your question. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, like, I kind of think we looked at the grades, we looked at how to prepare, we have the booklet there, we talked about preparing and being in the situation, we talked about from the examiner's point of view, so you've got the insight on how you can take advantage of that. We saw how it was an opportunity, we saw different ways to study in terms of your mate, maybe doing another practice one.
And one thing I would also just like add into that there is like, take advantage of what's around you. So, like, we all live on our phones. Nearly everyone has a smart TV or access to a laptop or something. If you go on to, like, say for argument's sake, you want to study Spanish, right? But you're like, oh, I'm just not bothered taking my book and stuff out.
See.
Go on to youtube.es and look at, like, so maybe, I don't know, maybe you
Spanish
watch,
YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, so but maybe you watch, like, I don't know, like gym videos or something. You probably do.
Don't need to.
What's the world record for chin-ups in Spanish? But like, without making a joke out of it, watch what you're interested in, but just watch it in Spanish. Or like go onto Netflix and search French language, and like you'll have access to all of these French movies and French TV shows and stuff.
There's probably
but in English subtitles.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. This is probably like, so if you look at the Spanish YouTube, is that just like normal YouTube that has subtitles?
No, it'd be like that the videos would be in Spanish.
That they're
but you
speaking
can,
I get
you
you.
can generate English subtitles on, or even
Oh,
you
perfect,
can
yeah.
generate Spanish subtitles on
So
them as
you
well.
thought you could go with 2 ways. Yeah. That's a handy.
And like but also that's something you could do at like, I don't know, like 9 o'clock at night, like when you'll be watching YouTube anyway, or when you'll be on your phone. So like maybe the week before your oral exam, you'd be like, well, actually, instead of watching everything in English, I'm going to make that extra effort. And like things like that are like, your teacher's not going to sit there and have the time to listen to every single person in the class, practice their pronunciation for every topic. So you want to be listening to as much of the language as you can to hear how as many different words as possible are pronounced.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah,
So,
no, that's fantastic, because
Yeah.
I actually did something similar to that when I did German in school, and I went back to look at a bit of German, and I remember I was watching I didn't know about the YouTube thing, some show that had German subtitles. It was one of the worst shows I've ever seen, but I actually found that after a while it had the English subtitles.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to look at the subtitles. I actually kind of got the gist of what was going on without that.
Well, like imagine
really
now,
quickly.
Yeah, imagine if you were in sixth year now and going onto Netflix and like having things like Narcos. That's all in Spanish. And it's an unbelievable series, and like people watch it that don't speak any Spanish. But like you could say, right, well, after, I don't know, like when I'm finished my homework now, I'm going to watch an episode of Narcos, and like I'm going to have a cup of tea and a snack or something with it, and like have an hour of listening to Spanish but actually really enjoying the show.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like versus like, because I had all those cringy things as well that your teacher would be like, oh, we're going to watch this and it's going to be so cool. And you'd be like, Jesus Christ, like this is the cringiest thing I've ever seen. But like having
Do you ever get nervous as a teacher now, like that you think you're being cool and the kids are thinking the same thing?
That's my life every day.
Okay, that's all right. As long as it's not just me.
I think it, I know.
It's not just me.
No, I know that my jokes are horrific.
I didn't say my jokes are horrific.
No, I'm talking about myself.
Okay.
Your jokes are brilliant, yeah.
Okay.
You're what I aspire to be when I grow up.
And I know what you mean. So like, but it's something that they would actually be able to interact with, so you'd be able to keep the attention more, but and you're still getting work done while.
Yeah, and it's
chilling.
something that's what I mean. Like sixth year and is so, it's so jam packed of stuff to do all the time that making the effort to study for your Spanish exam and just getting to be an episode of Narcos, and you could be active about it and say, well, every time I hear a phrase that I like, I'm going to write it down in the notes of my phone or something.
See.
Yeah, exactly. See, muy bien.
What? Okay, and no, that's fantastic. Just to kind of like round it up, if I was to put you on the spot here, so you don't know this question here.
Okay, I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous. You already have the answer in you. 3 either tips, just if you take 3 things, 3 tips or 3 or 3 don't do's. So 3 definitely do's or 3 don't do's that you would give to a student that only wants to listen to this last 2 minutes of the podcast.
Okay, so do something every day for your oral exam.
Okay.
So whether that's 5 minutes of reading through your answers, it's 5 minutes of practicing saying things out loud, or if it's 5 minutes of listening to yourself, whatever. Do that for 5 minutes every single day. Okay. No matter if you're hungover, if you're wrecked or anything like that, 5 minutes a day. Okay. Don't go in and think that you're going to be able to recite an A4 page of material for every single section, because you're not going to. And don't catastrophize the situation. Be logical about it. Think that in 15 minutes it's going to be finished. And you're going to be the person coming out and saying, guys, this is what I got asked, and she's actually really nice.
Yeah.
And also, as an extra one, remember that the examiner has had to do what you've done to get to where they are.
Yeah.
So they know what it's like to be on the other side of the examination room.
Yeah.
Do you know? So think about it in that sense.
Fantastic. Katie, thanks so much for coming in.
Listen, anytime
I think that's pretty good prep, I suppose as well then, if anybody wants to ask more questions, you're big on Insta these days, eh?
Yeah, listen.
What's your Insta again?
It's a cringy name, but anyway, it's Miss Len's Languages, because my surname is Lenahan. And I thought that Miss Lenihan's languages would be too long. So.
Yeah, no, that's trendy.
Yeah,
trendy.
listen, call me Miss Len if you like. You know.
Lit. Yeah, no, that's cool.
That's what
So
I should have called it, lit languages, where languages are
copyright.
lit.
Yeah, okay, that's fantastic. So yeah, I know you're putting a load of good stuff up there for Spanish and French in general.
Yeah.
And then obviously we've got some stuff on the schools page. There's a couple of videos and a couple of notes downloaded. But no, I think that made me confident that I could do an oral.
You should go and do it now.
Priorities, Katie. Priorities. No, but thanks so much for coming in.
Anytime.
And sure, we'll probably actually chat to you again closer to the Leaving Cert about the actual paper itself and how we can recycle that material into.
Yeah. Now don't recycle your exam paper.
What?
Don't recycle your exam paper.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Katie. No, that was great. Thanks so much.
Adios.